Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 143 for February 24th, 2011. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And from nowhere, I am Al Malventano.
He returns. He returns.
How exactly have we gotten to 143 of these things without people coming to lynch us?
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of surprising. People keep listening instead of lynching us, so that's why we keep making them, I guess. I assume somebody's listening. Let's put it this way. Some people are downloading the podcast. Whether or not they just download it just to use up our bandwidth and charge us money, completely possible. It could all be Alan going from different IP addresses in the military combine, downloading it, hundreds of thousands of times. Yeah, could be that. But I'm going to assume we actually have listeners that care, people in the chat room that care. All this is what's going on for us. So we're going to cover the last week's worth of hardware news. Quite a bit to get to, actually. If you want to send us an email or a voicemail, none of which we will actually get to today because of various technical reasons, but we still encourage you to do that. Email us, podcast@pcper.com, 1-888-38-PCPer, toll-free, U.S. and Canada. That means, yes, even Jeremy. Actually, we should use that for you, Jeremy, when you need to get me messages.
Hey, there we go.
Just leave me a toll-free voice
dirty message.
Yeah. Anyway, first thing we're going to start with, AMD has responded to the Sandy Bridge bug issue with Intel. Not with a magical new processor release, not with, a magical new processor release. What they did instead was attempt to sell everybody their current existing stack of products. I think we talked about this last week or a couple weeks ago when we first saw the ads running around on the internet that said ready, willing, and stable, a not-so-subtle jab at some of the problems that Intel has had with the Sandy Bridge chipset and associated launch. So, Josh, you wrote up an editorial on this, kind of, giving us a brief analyzed look at what this kind of marketing push is and why they couldn't really bring us things like Llano or Bulldozer any quicker.
Yeah, I wrote this up. It was a nice editorial, I guess. And something that I covered in there is that in the processor industry, golden opportunities do not come very often. And when they do, you need to be prepared to take advantage of them. Now, golden opportunities do not equate to golden showers, thank goodness. But they come even fewer times than in Ryan's household. Anyway.
I was going to say, yeah.
Can we move on from there? Thank you.
Let's do it. Yeah.
AMD has a golden opportunity, or at least they did have a golden opportunity to try to get their name out there in a little bit more prominent fashion than what they've been experiencing. The Sandy Bridge blow-up that Intel has recently suffered due to the chipset issue was one of those. And it's interesting to watch AMD as it took them several weeks to actually formulate a response to something that just came out of the blue. Now, things move at a fast pace in this industry, but in many ways you cannot make these giant turnarounds just, essentially on a dime. And so AMD was
about marketing turnarounds, or are you talking about technology?
I'm talking about release turnarounds. I'm talking about technology. So if you're planning on, say, an April or May launch of a product, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to reel that in to a January timeframe, unless, of course, you're Intel and you've got these warehouses full of Pentium 2 processors. AMD releases a K6, and 1 month later you're able to pull forward your launch by 4 months of the Pentium 2 and somehow get that onto a old 440FX motherboard chipset.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen, and AMD certainly does not have the money or not so much the forethought, but just not the ability to produce and stack up product in warehouse and just wait for a large launch. But I was expecting more from AMD in terms of marketing. A couple of days after, we talked to some folks at AMD, and they said, well, we have no plans that we know of that we're going to do anything about this. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation for Intel. We might pick up some business, but as far as I know, we don't have any plans. Well, a couple of weeks later, we finally saw this ad that says, ready, willing, and stable, and it's the jab at Intel. And that was on one website, and next thing you know, another week later, a couple other enthusiast websites were contacted about running these kind of ads. And this is really one of the first ad campaigns directed towards end users. If you go back to some of AMD's ads in the past, a lot of them are very, very server-centric, they're
And anything that addressed the consumer market was always partner-driven, right? It was always an MSI motherboard or an HP system powered by AMD. They did very little direct marketing.
Yeah. And so, other than every once in a while you get an ad in PC World or, some of these more enterprise server-based magazines, and very rarely on the web, AMD has done very little. Now, part of that is that they just don't simply have the marketing budget that Intel does. And Everybody knows Intel. They've got that little 5-note ditty that is stuck in your head since stinking 1997. AMD they've not been able to do that. So this was a little bit of a turnaround for them in that they're saying, hey, let's get our stuff into gear. We've got this opportunity to possibly take some market share away from Intel because, here's this new product. They're going to take $1 billion essential hit due to replacing motherboards and lost sales. Let's try to soak that up, even though it's only Q1, which is the slowest quarter of the year. Let's see what we can do. Right. And, it took them 3 stinking weeks to finally formulate even just a basic plan. And, it's a little bit of a criticism towards AMD. But it's what it is, and that picture that just showed up there was actually one of the more clever things that they did. And Ryan, if you would like to explain it.
It was basically a kind of a Valentine's Day surprise kind of gift hoax type thing that they sent to editors with a little mug, an I Heart APU mug with a couple of pieces of chocolate in it and a little note that claimed to be coming from, I guess it came from a fictional character APU, and it kind of said, hey, we heard Sandy B broke your heart. I've got this great friend named Lano, or from Lano, Texas. I think you guys will hit it off. That type of thing. And it was just humorous little marketing ditties, yeah. And
it is something that promotes goodwill with editors and people around the industry, and they think and they see it and they kind of chuckle and laugh, and that's a good positive thing. And these are things that we just have not seen from AMD in a long time. I mean, they've been very, very conservative when it comes to marketing, and in some ways that's been good, in other ways it's been bad. I mean, they don't get their name out there nearly as much as they should, but at the same time, they're not out there promoting vaporware. They're not, raising their products up on high only to have them fall down in real-life experience. And so this is a good first step, but again, AMD has been a company in the past who has been viewed as pretty agile. When the K5 was not doing so well, they went and they bought up Next Gen, and they got the K6 out there. Digital Equipment Corporation started shutting down their Alpha stuff. They hired up a bunch of the engineers, namely, Dirk Meyer and the group, and brought them in, and it really helped to turn around the company in terms of processor performance and general public perception. And they've done that as well. They're the first to integrate the memory controller onto a desktop chipset or chip. Right. And, the Athlon 64 was a big success. They were one of the first to have a true monolithic, dual-core, product that was, actually workable and fast and didn't require a nuclear generator to run. And so there were a lot of good things going on at AMD, but, a lot of times they just didn't really trumpet their triumphs nearly as much as they probably should. So, they really do need to look to be more agile in marketing, and I know this isn't a terribly interesting thing for most hardware enthusiasts.
Right.
But if they want AMD to survive,
Sure.
and to provide competition, this is one area that AMD really does need to address. And, not having any kind of good, response to Intel's huge chipset problem with the Sandy Bridge, I mean, it's just not quite inexcusable, but it's bordering on it. I mean, they needed to hit it harder and get it out there. But who knows, what the hierarchy of AMD is doing anymore. I mean, a bunch of guys have all taken off. So it's hard to say. But anyway, that was the essential gist of it. They weren't able to pull in Delano or Bulldozer. They weren't even able to pull in any of the AM3 Plus motherboards, which you would think that they would have a lot of that infrastructure and product out to partners already, just because we're expecting kind of a March, April launch of this kind of motherboard. Mm-hmm. And so it's disappointing that they weren't able to react a little bit better to this opportunity that Intel gave them.
One company that does not have any problems with marketing and being quick and nimble on these types of things is OCZ. We've seen this company take a dramatic shift from being a memory manufacturer or memory vendor to now basically getting out of the memory business altogether and focusing almost exclusively on solid-state disk products. Now, the reason Alan wasn't with us last week is he was trying to complete one of these articles. And, Alan, we took a look at what is, I guess we can't say it's the first SATA 6G product. That was the Crucial / Micron C300 SSD. But this is kind of like the first, we want to call it like the first real SATA 6G drive, or just the second one. Or tell us a little bit about, I guess this is a new SandForce controller, and this is a professional version, not necessarily a consumer version, but it should be somewhat indicative of what we expect to see in the future.
Right. That Crucial drive came out, that was a year ago? That was a long time.
It's been a long time, yeah.
And unfortunately, it had a lot of things going against it, because it was pretty early for one of those controllers. There was the motherboard side controller just wasn't there yet initially. And then when the Marvell one was coming out, which was right around the same time the C300 came out, the Marvell controller is just not that good, especially when you're talking to a solid-state drive. And by not that good, I mean we've benchmarked regular spinning disks that are for SATA 6 that perform much more poorly on the Marvell controller. So if a regular slow spinning disk is going to be worse, then the solid-state drive is just out the window, basically. So in many ways, that Marvell drive would actually, or the Crucial drive would actually perform better on the native Intel 3G, SATA 2 or SATA 3 gigabit controller.
Right.
Moving on to SandForce, SandForce historically, their controllers tend to peg whatever the speed is of that bus, right? So this was the first drive we were expecting it to be that kind of a same thing, right? Where second generation serial ATA, it took solid state drives a while to catch up and make it to the point where they were completely saturating that, because that's where they were sort of still developing and flash memory was getting faster. So when this came out, we were sort of expecting just a doubling of everything. And as far as sequential throughput goes, that was very much the case, especially on reads. Drives really, really fast on reads, talking 520 meg per second, easy on reads. So it's saturating serial ATA 6 gigabit. And I mean, roughly, it's an equal doubling in many ways. There was the drive that we got, it wasn't the shipping firmware yet. There was a little bit of quirkiness to it. We saw some issues with writes, specifically if you're only writing to the drives. Sometimes it would hesitate just a little bit. There was some other stuff going on there. But again, it was beta level firmware, so we expect a couple of quirks. But for most of the benchmarking and most of our look at that drive, it was very, very impressive to see that exact doubling. And along those lines, my favorite test, which is IOmeter, or IOmeter, however you want to say it,
Iometer is how I say it.
Iometer, well, yeah.
Iometer. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Iometer. Da, 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 da.
Josh. Blast from the past, man. So what usually happens with solid-state drives is in that particular test, in our test suite that we run on it with our profiles, drives will usually ramp up and then they'll level off at a certain Q depth. Basically, when you go higher in the Q depth, the drive just can't go any faster. Usually it's because it's hitting a throughput limit for the much faster drives. There are some drives that they're just slow. Just
look at the size of that arch.
Yeah, so what happens here is, since we've doubled the interface throughput, and SandForce drives, which historically have been one of the better ones that can ramp up in this kind of a test, right? Usually the cheesy, the drives that are like just can't really multitask or can't really do much parallelization, those things will just be level. They're just straight line across the board on this. The drives that can ramp up when you pile more commands on them are the Intel drives specifically. Vertex, like the initial ND-Lynx controller, does it a little bit. But it's mainly Intel and SandForce. So what was really good to see was the SandForce drive just like, it started off a little bit slower. At really low Q depths, it was equal to or maybe even a little bit lower than the previous generation SandForce. And you can probably attribute that to just a little bit more latency just because, well, think of it as like a muscle car, right? It's able to go faster in a straight line, so there's going to be a little bit of a hit on the corners, so to speak. However, when you do hit that straight line, when you do start piling a whole bunch of commands on this drive, the thing just goes really, really fast. So web server test, we were seeing like 30,000 IOs per second, which previously, compared to the X25M, for example, the 160 gig model, which is pretty darn good, that one was only hitting 15K. So we've got a SandForce controller doubling the IOs per second of Intel, and it's mainly because of throughput, right? Because previous generation SandForce, well, actually, it would sort of come close to Intel, but it could never get there. Now, it's doubling Intel with a doubling of the throughput. So that's actually very good to see from this controller. I'm hoping that the Intel solutions that are coming, we hope, soon, are going to do the same thing, but we won't know until we take a look at one. But yeah, real good performance. There's a couple of quirks we saw, not just on the writes. There was something weird that I picked up. I didn't mention it in the review, but it's worth mentioning now because I'm seeing the same thing on another drive, which is supposed to be retail, and that is when you go to format it. These are 220 or 250 gig models that we checked. In the case of the enterprise model, it's only 200, right? I think it shows up as 180. The consumer one's supposed to be, I think, 240, shows up as around 220 to the OS. When you go to format these things, I've seen anywhere up to like 5 minutes under Windows 7 for a format, which looks like it's hanging on the part of the format because realize Windows 7 trims the drive when it formats. Right, when it does a create of a partition and a format simultaneously, it issues trim across that whole area. And it seems to be that's what's causing the delay. So I don't know if that's just a early, first generation new SandForce chip firmware thing that they need to work on or what, but it was. And this is a quick format I'm doing, right? So that's something, even with a regular hard drive, you would expect it to take just a few seconds, even on like a 2 terabyte drive. Yep. And here we have an SSD basically hanging the computer management screen for like 5 minutes. So that might be enough to make people, if they were doing a fresh Windows 7 install, which I haven't tested in the install environment to see if that delay happens as well. But if that happens when you're trying to do an install, there's going to be some people that are probably going to think that something's wrong. Because if you sit there 4 solid minutes at a hanging screen on a computer with an SSD in it, it's, we would probably start rebooting or doing something, being impatient in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, so something worth mentioning, if you do get one of these and you notice the format takes a while, just be patient, give it a couple of minutes. It seems proportional to how big of a partition you're doing, so it does seem to make sense that it's related to trim. if you only format half the drive, it takes half as long, right? But yeah, just something to note. So, what's left? Pricing. What do you think? Keep in mind this is a pro enterprise class. Yeah, see that's the thing. You have the over provisioning is working against you because there's more spare area, and so we're talking like 200 gig model. Actually, the 400 gig was the sweet spot, if you can consider it a sweet spot for $1,400. I'm guessing people are probably going to get the 200 if they go for this model specifically. Probably be a power user enough to do it, and that's a big jump. Go from 100 to a 200 model. It goes from $525 a gig to $387 a gig. So it's like a 50% drop per gig, roughly.
That's pretty severe.
I guess they fabbed that Sandforce chip out of gold.
Apparently. Yeah. So 200 gig model is probably going to be the one that sells for this, and that's $775. That's up.
Sogan way.
I would not.
Right, and neither would I. Now, granted, it's only a few years ago. One of us plunked down $650 on an 80 gig Intel drive.
Weren't me.
So, yeah, that's because they sent them to you, my friend. So, the consumer grade one is supposed to be significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
And we'll know for sure once it actually hits Newegg. But what was the perspective? It was like $1.72 a gig, like much, much cheaper.
Do you want to know the most expensive drive that I ever bought for my computer?
Uh-oh.
No.
Let me think. It was a 4 gig, one of the first ATA 33 drives out, and it was like $245. I wish I had that $245 back. Now.
With interest. Let's see, what else we got on the list? Steve posted a review of another P67 motherboard, the ECS P67H2A LGA 1155 board. Yes, you cannot buy this board today. Within 30 days or so, you'll be able to buy this exact same board with the updated chipset. We definitely put that disclaimer at the top of the article for a reason. The performance, the features, the included extras, all that kind of stuff will be the same once these boards are re-released. So if you are still interested in the Sandy Bridge platform, you're waiting for these boards to come back out so you can pick up a motherboard and processor and memory and all that kind of deal, go ahead and do the research, pay attention. That way when they come back for sale, you can be ready to hit that purchase button. So check out that review on the website. Real quick, we'll take a break to thank today's podcast sponsor. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for that. We've got a couple of other things we're going to get to. We're going to talk to Josh here a little bit about the Bulldozer architecture, some information that came out from that at the ISSCC conference, which I don't like the name of. But a couple of random things that I'm working on here. No reviews yet. The first one is this. I don't know if anybody can see this, really. This is the OnLive micro console. I know this is everybody's favorite company, mine especially.
Oh, especially ours. I'm surprised they sent it to you.
Oh, they didn't. I paid actual actual money for that.
Paid good money.
This is you can play OnLive on your TV without having to have a computer type deal. You can see on the front, you've got 2 USB ports for controllers or charging the controller that it comes with, power button on there. On the back, you will see focus is not my friend today, a Ethernet port, an HDMI port, optical output, stereo audio output, power input, and an AV output, I'm assuming, for composite, that type of thing. It didn't come with that cable. You'll notice here, maybe, that the power plug and the audio input plug are almost at the same size, and pretty much every time I've hooked it up so far, I've plugged the power cable into the audio one first. So that was stupid. It's heftier than I thought it was going to be. It's a little bit weightier. It's a pretty dense product. I will say that, my thoughts, theories, opinions on the service in general haven't really changed much. It's impressive that they get all this working, and it's really that simple. You HDMI out to the TV, Ethernet in, power. The controller, I thought I had one here. I don't have it here sitting with me, but it feels very, very similar to an Xbox 360 controller. It comes with a rechargeable battery. It's wireless. The USB is only if you absolutely have to, in a similar vein to what the Xbox and PS3 are doing. Initial first impressions of playing it on a big screen TV as opposed to a high resolution PC display. We've got a 50-inch plasma TV in here we use for various testing things. Sitting, 7-8 feet away from it, you could definitely still see the compression artifacts with the video. That didn't go away. However, I tried it at my house as well, sitting, 15 to 18 feet away, and the video quality improves pretty dramatically because you can't see all of the small imperfections in the video compression. It actually, I have to say, it looks pretty good in that form factor, the couch or beyond viewing distance. It's not really meant for up close, which is what we're, when you're playing it on a PC or on a laptop, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a 720p video compressed, internet compressed video blown up to full size there. Latency still the issue, though. Ken and I were in here playing, and we played some 2D games like Braid, and even in that game where it's basically Super Mario with puzzles, more complex puzzles, the lag between hitting the jump button and actually seeing the character jump was noticeable at first. It's something you can get used to on a platforming game like that. However, on a first-person shooter like Metro 2033, it was very difficult to get used to that because I was always overshooting where I was trying to aim for, even on a controller, not using a mouse and keyboard, that type of thing. So I think right now I'm going to spend a little bit more time with it before I write up the whole kind of review editorial on it. Still in the same spot where it was before, where it's really cool technology that almost works, but I don't think they're going to get it to work without significant changes in network topology of our ISPs and stuff like that. So, interesting. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, it's a decent deal still. $80, I think, is what it is right now. $79. It was on sale. Maybe it's $99 again. But still interesting technology, right? And that's what we're here to talk about, is the technology of things. Just the implementation may not be as great or as awesome or as perfect as they wanted it to be. The other interesting thing I'm showing off today, nearly finished with the write-up, is this little motherboard. I don't think I've shown this yet. This is the ECS E350IA E45.
Is that the ECS or MSI?
This is the MSI board. So This is the MSI Fusion platform. So this is what you might be looking to build your next home theater PC from, your next micro ATX computer. Underneath this heatsink and fan is the Fusion APU, the AMD E350 processor. And then you've got your Hudson chipset there, 2 DIMM slots, DDR3, 1 full-size PCI Express slot. Excuse me. So if you want to put in a discrete graphics card, I guess you can do that.
Well, except the card will be bigger than the board is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I mean, from a performance standpoint, it's really not that good of an idea. The GPU and CPU performance are pretty well matched together, I think, on this platform. You do get USB 3.0 support, VGA and HDMI output, gigabit Ethernet, 8-channel digital and analog audio. It's a pretty good system. Performance is almost exactly in line with what we saw from the Fusion APU demos at when we went to test them at AMD. They match up pretty evenly there. So good platform and everything in general. One of the more interesting things I had to get for this, I didn't have to, but I kind of needed to. Didn't really have a power supply that was appropriate for these types of machines, so I picked up one of these from Newegg, NMedia something or other. NMedia, I can't remember the name of it, but it is essentially a power supply that you plug in a standard. It comes with a AC adapter power brick here, 80 watts maximum, little circuit board, and this gives you an ATX power plug as well as 2 Molex connectors and 1 SATA power connector. So you can power these types of mini ITX motherboards where you use this for this review, also for the Atom board comparisons that we're going to do, all that type of stuff. Also coming up soon, no other more details, and this is a Zotac home theater PC, kind of in a box, Fusion powered, also powered by the AMD E350, integrated Blu-ray drive, USB 3, eSATA, HDMI, kind of a little bit plasticky. It looks nicer than it feels, I guess is what I'll say, but it's kind of nice having all that kind of integrated in a nice chassis up front as well. So more on all that hopefully by next week.
Wow, that's tiny. Does it come with storage in there? The Zotac one.
The Zotac one includes a 250 gig hard drive and memory. So this is basically everything you need except an operating system out of the box with this. And I think it's probably selling for probably around $400, $500. I haven't looked up recently.
What kind of outputs does it have?
It has DVI and HDMI, as well as optical audio output on that. eSATA, gigabit Ethernet, 2 USB 3.0 ports, 1 standard USB port, headphone, and mic. It also has an SD memory card reader, multi-card reader, and of course the integrated Blu-ray drive, which is, it's nice. And it lights up nice and pretty in blue and stuff right here. Like I said, it's actually a pretty nice home theater PC chassis already integrated for you. So if that's something, you can access the hard drive here at the bottom, for our testing, we replaced it with an SSD so we have equal comparisons across the board, access the memory and all that kind of stuff here. So if you want to do your basic upgrades, you still have that option. So,
hey, Ryan, guess what?
Chicken butt.
I hate you.
Well, that's nice to know. Anyway, let's talk to Josh with more pleasant topic.
Really? More presents? Thank goodness I have beverages to wet the whistle.
Now, looking at the time, looking at how detailed and deep of an article type of analysis this is, we probably don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I definitely wanted to point people out to a story that just went up literally moments before recording this podcast.
Moments.
A story titled Bulldozer at ISSCC, the future of AMD processors. So this is, I guess, some information came out at ISSCC about Bulldozer architecture. This is the first time we've seen this type of stuff. Give us as high-level an overview as you can about what kind of architectural changes are significant.
Boy, high level. That's kind of hard for me because
it is. We're
I'm a minutia guy. I mean, really, look at me. It's my life revolves around minutia. Anyway, ISSC, International Solid State Circuits Conference, I believe is what that stands for. And a couple of months ago, AMD went to the Hot Chips Conference, and they told us a few things about Bulldozer that we did not know before. Some basic general topology. How it all works. And this time they were able to do a little bit more in depth on several different areas. One, they did talk about more of the topology more, why they made the decisions that they did, why their idea of SMT, which is the symmetric multi-threading, which Intel has, is just not good enough for them. They want to do something different. This is one of the first truly new architectures from AMD since, Bobcat. But let's throw that out. Let's say it's the first really true new architecture since the Athlon back in 1997.
All right.
They have designed this from the ground up, and they've made a lot of changes. You've got the 2 integer execution units per module, and both of those share the floating point SIMD unit. They still support the old MMX functions. Those are integer SIMD. There's 2 pipes in that floating point. They've just beefed up everything, but they've also done some interesting stuff in that they have lowered the transistor count, but have improved the amount of functionality and performance of this processor. Now, if you take a look at the Phenom 2, it's like 260 millimeters square in die size. If you look at the Core i7 920 and that series, they're just, slightly larger, like 262 millimeters square or something like that. AMD was never able to extract as much performance per transistor and per, millimeter squared as Intel was able to do. Well, this was one of their biggest goals in Bulldozer. And not only that, but they tried to get it so that they could extract as much speed as possible out of this while still using as many transistors. When I say extract as much speed, that's hopping up the whole gigahertz. They gave us some of the first physical specifications of the Bulldozer core, and each module is about 30.9 millimeters square. It runs at 3.5 gigahertz plus, so we can expect to see 3.6, 7, 8, possibly up to 4 gigahertz in the near future. Well, maybe not near future, but 8 months or so. And so they've done a whole lot of stuff to it that is very, very interesting. It's got 2 megs of L2 cache per core. AMD and GlobalFoundries have worked very hard together to get their SRAM cells down as small as possible. So we're going to possibly see full 4-module, 8-core chips with as much as 8 megs of L3 cache and 8 megs of L2 cache together. With server chips, they could adjust that and have more L3 cache or whatever. So that's the basic on the chips. There were 3 programs that they talked about. The second one was talking more about the integer scheduler and the integer execution units. And since most computer workloads do deal with integer-type functions rather than floating point, this is something that AMD really wanted to work on. And so there were a couple of interesting things. I mean, it's like a 40-entry scheduler. It's pretty wide. It can do up to 4 by 64-bit instructions per clock and in flight. And not only the thing that's interesting to me is that AMD is able to do a bunch of standard cell type design. Now there are 3 different cell types in processor design. There's standard cell. There's dynamic transistors, I guess, can be the second, and then there's custom cell. Standard is the slowest, but the edges and the entire design is very, very regular. So you can use these EDA type software, this automatic place and route type software, to make designs very, very quickly using this technology. But the bad thing about it is the power draw and the overall clock speed is poor as compared to custom cell. Now, the custom cell, it has fast switching. The power draw is very small per megahertz or gigahertz or wherever you want to go. But the problem is that it takes a lot of time to place out these cells, to get them all to work together and to do it right. Well, AMD has been able to use standard cells and place them in this processor design and still get them into a standard type TDP range and at 3.5 gigahertz and above. So they've been able to kind of optimize this entire area and still use these standard cells and be able to bring these designs up to speed very, very quickly by doing that. But they don't have any of the downside of trying to do custom type work, which takes just ages to do as compared to standard cell. Now, the third area that we're looking at is power. Since this is a brand new design, from the ground up, one of their main objectives was to get power down there as much as possible. Now, in previous designs, power was kind of a secondary measure. They wanted to get performance up there. They still wanted to hit the same TDPs, but they kind of added on a lot of power and gating stuff as an afterthought, and it took a while to get that in. It was not necessarily as good as it could have been. But with Bulldozer, I mean, that's one of their main goals at the beginning is power, and so they've got 30,000 different areas and circuits around the with a processor that you can turn off and turn on depending on the workload. And so you're looking at a 5 to 10% difference in even at the very highest levels of usage as compared to an older Phenom 2 or the older Phenom or any of the previous processors. So AMD has really done a big focus on that. So we should see some pretty fast running processors at standard TDPs that we've kind of grown used to. Overall, you're kind of hesitant to say, Bulldozer is going to be the new Athlon or the new Athlon 64 for AMD because we've been burned by the Phenom and to a part, the Phenom 2. The Phenom 2 came out around the same time as the i7 and it just could never compete, even though it finally kind of caught up to the Core 2 series of products. And the Phenom was a disaster in itself with the TLB bug, and it just was never as fast as it needed to be. And we're looking at this kind of, a little hazy. I mean, is AMD going to actually be able to succeed with a part that will get it competitive with Intel? And overall, my feeling is they are going to be competitive. I do not think that it's going to be a quantum leap for AMD. It's not going to be another Athlon 64 where they've totally jumped over where Intel was with the Pentium 4. And so what this is going to give us is certainly some nice competition in an environment where we have not seen this level since 2004, 2005. So, I don't expect miracles out of it. Yeah. But it certainly seems like it's going to be a solid part. It's going to be competitive, and I think in terms of price and overall performance, AMD is going to be right there. And certainly in certain workloads, it could be very much superior to what Intel has. I mean, with the integer units as they are, and how Intel handles SMT, in heavily threaded applications, we could see AMD take a pretty significant jump over Intel. And especially if you're using as well a lot of SSE2, SSE3, SSE4 type applications, AMD is going to have another jump over Intel in their current implementation. It isn't until AVX becomes a lot more common that Intel will kind of catch up and then overtake AMD with their current units. So this is a good thing for AMD. It's nice that we could hear more about it. Read the article if you want some more details than what I have glossed over here. Do you guys have any comments about it? Or
I don't have anything offhand. I mean, it's just... It sounds really good, and it sounds innovative, but so many things they have said have felt that way to me. I'm kind of in the same boat as you kind of mentioned in the conclusion. It's like, yeah, it sounds really cool, but at this point, AMD really needs to prove to us, as well as customers and everybody else, that they're going to put out a product that's actually going to compete. And hopefully not just on the price performance value, but in raw performance as well. So, yeah. Jeremy, why don't you hit us up with a bit of news from this past week?
Well, we all know that Intel is heavily favoring the 6 gigabit SATA ports as opposed to the 3 gigabit,
yes,
as
true.
we sort of noticed with Sandy Bridge. But they've just announced the Intel 510 series of super fast hard drive replacements. Known normally as a solid-state drive, but apparently that's what their marketers came up with.
Hard drive replacements, huh? That's nice.
That's what it says on the box. But this is going to be a SATA 6 gigabyte SSD, and we're really excited about this because Intel's drives are incredible. They start out really fast. They may not perhaps be quite as fast as the Vertex 3 as we saw earlier with Alan when the Q depth gets really big, but they start out fast, which is what most home users are interested in. They don't really have 256 users hitting a database at the same time.
It'll be interesting to see if, so all this information in this news post is all speculative. So they quote 470 megs per second read, 315 megs per second write, 20,000.
And the other thing they did,
4K
they dodged the whole conversation about the 24 nanometer flash, or 25 nanometer.
Yeah.
25.
Yeah, because they're sticking with 34. So you're not going to see that slight little reduction in capacity. And, as other sites have proved, if you're writing about 7 gigabits to your drive every single day, you might kill it in about 1,000 years or so. So, there's a big kerfuffle about how long this 25 nanometer flash is going to remain viable. Hey, Intel has just sidestepped it. They're going with the 34 nanometer, and so no one can really say anything about it.
Actually, that not to jump in too bad on it, but that the whole 34 nanometer versus 25 nanometer thing with SandForce, that should be SandForce specific as far as the capacity reduction.
No,
and that's
fair,
only
because they compress it, right?
It's a funky issue specific to SandForce, or at least it should be. It has to do with this. One of the features of a SandForce controller is this thing called RAID. It's like sort of basically the flash chips that are in the drive act sort of like a RAID, like a mini version of a RAID, and it has to do with how it distributes some of the error correcting parity info. And with specific capacities on the new SandForce and with the 25 nanometer flash, it has to do with it's like an uneven division of how that data gets spread around. So the end result is it's 120 and 240 gig drives. Wait, no, it was what, 60 and 120, right, Ryan? I think it was those two.
Yeah.
Like the two middle capacities
that the OCZ kerfuffle was all about.
Right. Those two middle capacities, that division, it doesn't work out the right way, so they have to over provision a little more, just for it to work right. That's just how the numbers weigh out.
Math.
But
Ugh.
just to sort of cancel that out, though, if you look at the 240 or the 200 gig version of that same thing on the new SandForce, you don't have that issue, and it's just because again of that subdivision kind of funkiness going on there. So the Intel drive should not see that. I would not imagine they're going to have any kind of that subdivision kind of thing.
So do you look at SSDs and make inappropriate gestures and say over provision this?
No. I
That's
just see
too
crap
bad.
out of them.
You should. It probably relieve some stress.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting. You mentioned, Alan, the SandForce specific thing. We posted a news story about Corsair taking a different approach than OCZ on how they were addressing / telling people about these changes, because there were some users complaining when the first OCZ drive started shipping with 25 nanometer flash instead of 34 nanometer flash, that suddenly they would buy a 120 gig drive that would usually format at let's say 110 or something like that.
Right.
And all of a sudden now it was formatting at 104 or 103.
Yeah.
But
it was
Corsair's doing
something like
different.
5% drop, I think, is what it worked out to, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And so there was not only that issue that people were reporting, but they were reporting differences in performance, right? So same where OCZ got in hot water was same model number specifically, right? So they weren't labeling them different or anything. And that's where Corsair is handling this differently, up to and including different model number and different, Corsair always puts the capacity as part of the model of their drive, in bold letters, so that F120 or F115 in the case of the 25 nanometer, which is, I like to see that. That's good. It definitely makes ordering them easier.
Yeah.
But what you should consider, though, is, yes, there's going to be differences. It's a different process flash. The block size is different. The page size is different. The controller has to handle all of that shuffling of data much differently. But that doesn't necessarily mean the performance is worse across the board. There's, I think it was the Anand piece where when he looked at it, he was like the thing, like the seat of the pants kind of
Tom's Hardware,
feel.
I think is what you're thinking about.
Was it Tom's one? Okay. Where the actual how it should feel to the person type tests were a little bit better, whereas a lot of the other more synthetic kind of benches were a lot worse.
Interesting.
Which is almost understandable because the block size for 25 nanometer is larger. So when you hit that type of flash memory with much smaller accesses, the drive is going to have a much harder time, just because it has to shuffle more data in the background in order to make those same things happen versus the 34 nanometer. This happens every time there's a step up. we didn't notice it that much for 34 nanometer because that flash memory was also much faster, and it was the same thing that caused all those SSDs at the time to start saturating serial ATA. So everybody was so blinded by the fact that there was this big jump that they couldn't really nitpick the performance. Now that everything's saturating the bus, you start seeing those other differences come up. The controller starts to be the bottleneck more than the than the bus it's talking over. So yeah, and this is actually really good of Corsair to put out. They just threw out numbers. So like, here, we looked at it. We ran some benchmarks. Here you go. They didn't even wait for the review sites to take a look at it. They were just like, order which one you want. Here's the two models.
Yeah,
so,
they had the benefit of having OCZ do that first. So they got, they saw kind of how OCZ got attacked. No, maybe not attacked, but criticized for what they were doing, and were able to make a more informed decision, I guess we'll say. There's benefits of going second in this business, for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's see, another bit of news. Intel is potentially going to be launching LightPeak tomorrow. They sent out emails to media for an event happening tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Simply states, on Thursday, February 24th, Intel will host a Views at 10 press briefing to discuss a new technology that is about to appear on the market. We can't provide you with more details at this time, but we believe this is an event you don't want to miss. Now, not a whole lot of information there, and quite frankly, when I first got that email, this is like, okay, fine, they want to talk about something, whatever, signed up, did all the things I need to do, put it on the calendar, and went about my business. And then we started seeing more and more of these rumors about the new Mac coming out, the new MacBook Pros, and that the big rumor, the big kind of story here was that they might also include LightPeak technology, and that they were going to be launching this maybe Thursday, maybe sometime early or late this week, early next week. So there's a lot of stuff kind of circulating about that. A lot of people are showing LightPeak implementations on these upcoming MacBook Pros. So it kind of fits that probably what we're going to see tomorrow from Intel is probably not MacBook Pro launches or demonstrations, but demonstrations of maybe add-in cards or PCs that are using LightPeak technology or adapters and accessories that use LightPeak technology. It kind of almost is interesting along these lines, or what these MacBook Pro rumors are saying, that Apple is going to be branding this as Thunderbolt technology, high-speed I/O.
God.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
All I hear is Sony. What was it? Sony iLink. Is that what it was? Remember
Instead
that?
of FireWire, yep.
Instead of FireWire? Yeah.
Well, and I guess FireWire was an Apple-created name, right? It used to just be IEEE 1394.
Okay.
Yep.
I think Apple created the FireWire name. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure Ken will run in here and tell me I'm right or wrong, or somebody in the room will know for sure.
I say we just call it. We should just make our own name and call it Fire and Brimstone. I don't know. It's
Fire Brimstone IO. So the
fast IO.
The linked kind of information description says it supports high-speed I/O and mini DisplayPort devices. And when they show a picture of what is supposedly the upcoming MacBook Pro,
and not photoshopped at all.
I don't think it is. But it shows the side of a MacBook Pro, and the connection for Thunderbolt is a mini DisplayPort connection. Like, it literally is a mini DisplayPort connection with a lightning bolt next to it instead of a DisplayPort connection next to it.
Lightning bolt.
It's very interesting. So I'm not 100% sure. No one's 100% sure that these products match up. It seems very likely that they are going to do that. Yes, there's also a cell phone coming out tomorrow called the Thunderbolt. Not related to Apple, not related to Intel, not related to I/O devices or anything like that. So it's good to have nice bit of confusion on the market. So it's kind of interesting that they would choose to use a mini DisplayPort connection for this. Ken and I were kind of debating why they would do this. The only reason I could think of is that if a user has an existing mini DisplayPort monitor, which the Apple Cinema displays that are currently for sale use, you would hope that if you plug it into that port, it's not going to break anything or simply not work, right? So I assume that it's maybe going to support both standards, mini DisplayPort standard as well as LightPeak. We're not exactly 100% sure how these technologies will work, coexist anyway. So, I mean, any thoughts or theories on anything that?
I'm just trying to envision what that's going to be. Like, is it going to be a display that has like a bunch of extra ports on that? They're trying to make it like a dockable kind of thing, maybe, where you can have like an extra hard drive in your display, perhaps.
Well, I think so. The LightPeak is supposed to be a daisy chainable connection, right?
Right.
So the idea would be is you hook up your monitor, and then your monitor has a female plug that then you hook up your hard drive to, and then that has a female plug that then you hook up another device, a scanner or something like that.
Right. But unless they make some kind of cheap fan-out connector, then they're forcing everybody to upgrade their panels.
Well, right? What they're doing is what they're going to try to do is force the industry to use the mini DisplayPort connection for LightPeak. Which actually, that sort of makes a lot of sense, because if you had everybody's laptop had that, that would actually be pretty cool, because then, think of like your typical Dell or HP or whatever displays, the ones that always come with the USB hub / card reader, other stuff in there. Just imagine if you took that another step further, right? And you made that sort of like what docks used to be for laptops, where you could have a dock and you can have not the thin ones, but like the older school, like the ones where you used to actually have like big spinning disc in there and stuff like that. Sure. So you can have like your bulk storage at home, but all wrapped up into some kind of small box next to your display, or maybe in your display. I mean, that's the goal of LightPeak when Intel created the technology, was that this is going to replace eSATA, SATA, lower speed PCI Express, USB, FireWire. This is display connections, all that type of stuff, maybe even DisplayPort. That's their goal. It's odd that they're using a mini DisplayPort connection here that is not, I don't know. It is an industry standard, but it's already used for so many other things that aren't LightPeak. It's really confusing. So I don't know. I think we'll get more information on this probably by the time this podcast is posted, if you're listening live tomorrow morning. So check back PCPer.com.
I'm more interested in the other stuff that storage related that those laptops are talking about. Because if people who listen to all of our episodes, if you listen about 3 episodes back before I started on my trek across the country, I was looking at one of the Lenovo laptops, which I'm going to write up pretty soon here. Test unit Lenovo laptop, which is supposed to have the Intel 310 in it, as well as a big spinning disk. The new MacBooks are supposed to be similar, right? They're supposed to be doing that same kind of thing. So that's actually a big deal. And if anybody remember what I said 3 weeks back, everybody should be doing this. Everybody should be jumping on this, and I'm glad Apple is. That might actually make me buy a MacBook finally, because I've always liked the hardware. What?
Or a Lenovo that has the same technology in it?
I don't know. I like what they do with their hardware. I like what Apple does with their hardware. Granted, I would immediately install Windows on it, which I know a lot of Mac users could probably hate me and want to get pitchforks and stuff. But I just like the hardware. It's elegant.
No, I agree. I agree. I like it. I won't be able to upgrade my MacBook Pro unless they include a express card slot. But meh.
Right. And along those lines, they might be able to fit something like an express card slot in there if they're doing something like with that 310 and a spinning disk. Then you got more room in there.
Yeah,
I don't know. Just throwing it out there. And,
a lot of questions.
And those systems should go really fast. It would be nice to see. I hate seeing, Mac or otherwise, I hate seeing any laptop shipped with an OS installed on a spinning hard disk these days, because that's just ridiculous. Because I've seen the kind of
it's expensive still, Alan. We have to admit that, right? If we're talking about that AMD Fusion-based system that I bought for $349.
Right. I agree with you, but think about the landslide that's about to start happening here. When you have companies start shipping their entire new line of laptops, for example, like Apple is potentially about to do here, with an SSD as the primary OS drive.
Yeah.
Right? If that's their default, think of the volume and the volume of SSDs that are going to ship in that form factor, and the price drops they're going to go along with that.
Think of the NAND shortages and how expensive shit will be.
Yeah. I think with 25 nanometer coming and the fact that they're still making 34, now you've got two different pools to come from, and I don't know. I think it's going to start.
I hope you are right. I fear you are not.
I don't know. I think
we've already seen what Apple can do to flash memory prices when they decide to buy everything, because that's what they do.
True, I'll give you that. But keep in mind that this is specific to. There's a difference between buying out all the touch panels, touch display things like they do, versus Apple laptops are not like the dominant take everything out of the market thing, right? I mean, Apple computer versus the PC market is a different percentage versus tablet makers trying to buy, that sort of thing, like touch panel interfaces. So that might actually be a good thing, because you're going to see just another healthy step up. It won't be a buyout, but it'll be a healthy step up of, hey, we're selling a lot more flash now. And hopefully that will result in the prices dropping instead of going up. That's all my hope is. And you're going to have users just will start to demand that more. That'll be the expectation, that you have some form of an SSD in there. You're going to have a lot more people seeing just how much snappier a laptop can be with an SSD. And it's just going to be a jump. It's coming soon this year. I'm calling it before the end of the year.
He's calling it. He's calling it. Mark that down.
Before the end of the year, probably Christmas season. Christmas season this year. I think only the most basic model laptops are going to be the ones with the spinning disk OS.
All right.
Seriously.
I hope you're right. Let's see. We don't have any emails again. Like I said, we had some connectivity problems. Basically, my computers at home became inaccessible, so I apologize. We'll get to some of those next week. Again, email address podcast@pcper.com, 1-888-38-PCPer, toll-free voicemail number, U.S. and Canada. Everybody call us, leave us wonderful messages of praise and hope for the future. It's all going to be on SSDs, according to Alan. Let's get to some hardware, software picks of the week. I'm kind of going to do a cheat here again and pick one of the items that I already kind of showed and discussed, and that is the MSI E350 IA E45. Now, the only complaint I'm going to mention about this board that I've seen so far is this fan on here is awful. It has it's not loud. It has just the kind of odd pitch to it that you could notice. And one of the most interesting things about it is that when you turn it on, it's very, very, very quiet. It's like silent. You can't hear it, but it very slowly ramps up its volume, almost like a car accelerating, but it's over a good 30 to 40 seconds of time that happens. And then it kind of peaks and stays the same. The good news is the retail versions of this motherboard do not use this heatsink. On the E350 IA model, if you get the IS model, it does in fact still use this annoying POS fan. If you get the IA model, which is what you want anyway, because that's the one that includes USB 3.0 and a couple of other additional features, I think more audio output options as well, has a much larger heatsink, a little bit bigger fan, and I have been sworn to by our promised MSI representative that it is a significantly quieter fan. So I'll still allow that recommendation to hold. But if you're looking to build a home theater PC, it's not going to be a computing powerhouse. It's not going to be a gaming powerhouse. It's, 2 or 3 notches above an Intel Atom processor, but not quite getting into, Phenom territory, Core 2 Duo territory, anything like that. A good low power system. I think the most power I could draw out of this through our fancy power supply, external power supply unit here was about 36 watts, 35 watts, something like that. So it's nice to have something to build around. So that's your weekend project.
Anything with a 40 millimeter fan is the devil.
Yeah, I agree.
Spin at like 10,000 RPM to get anything sort of.
I think I saw this one at like 6,000 RPM. It's pretty bad. And I told him I pretty much said that's the worst thing I've ever seen on one of these. Like I said, the other one is a little bit larger fan, and they promise that it's much quieter and the BIOS more properly implements the fan speed controls that this one just doesn't really have in this version of the firmware.
There was actually a similar issue with that from a few months back. I bought that ASRock, 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 however they say that.
ASRock.
Yeah, little home theater PC box. Same kind of deal, except there were two fans in there. There was like a bigger fan and then a smaller fan right on the CPU. And a lot of people were like going in the BIOS and ramping up the speed of the bigger fan and just unplugging the smaller fan just to get rid of the noise. Because it's just, if you have sensitive hearing in that high frequency thing. Like
and it doesn't feel like it. I mean, if it doesn't feel like it needs it either. I mean, the part runs so cool that I feel like I could unplug the fan. I don't want to because I don't want to kill anything, especially while I'm doing testing on it. But I feel like I could just unplug the fan, and if you have decent airflow through a chassis, you should be okay. But
if you had any kind of a 80 millimeter fan blowing somewhere in the direction of that heatsink, you could just pull that fan right off of that thing, and it would be just fine.
All right,
some kind of air going across it.
Who's next? Jeremy, what you got?
Well, actually, I got an old heatsink from a K7 system that might fit that. It's not actually that loud for a 40 millimeter fan.
Oh.
But my pick this week is the brilliant minds behind this new game that's come out, Bulletstorm, which have, completely captured the idea behind PC gaming. I mean, it's just brilliant to lock the frames per second at 62 max. The idea of, taking away mouse support in the menus is innovative. Trimming down all of the graphical options to the absolute bare minimum so that, you can experience the exact same thing that you would on a console just blows my mind. But the best step of all was to encrypt your INI files so that, those pesky hackers that like to go in and, actually change settings that don't exist in the game in the INI files are defeated by your encryption scheme, which is actually just a minor annoyance because it's very lightly and you can grab freeware off the web to break into it and do whatever you feel like. It's just amazing. I hope that more and more games just jump on this bandwagon of locking down the PC because who wants to be able to customize things on a PC?
Hey, speaking of which, anybody else play Crysis 2? Huh?
I actually never bothered.
No, I didn't.
Did you actually do it?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Nor have I tried. What was the other new one that took me by surprise that came out that I completely, what was it, Dead Space? No.
Oh, Dragon Age 2?
Dead Space 2.
Dead Space 2? Yeah.
And Dead Space 1 scared the bejesus out of me repeatedly, so I need to play the second one.
I've heard it's really good to play with headphones on, like at 1 a.m. with all the lights out, that kind of deal.
All the lights out and surround sound.
That's how I played Doom 3 when it first came out, and that was also had some jumpy moments. So
yeah, because when that monster jumped out of the broom closet that was located inside the broom closet, that was just the pinnacle of PC gaming design.
Who
would have thought that there was a broom closet within a broom closet? Not me.
Playing Dead Space 1, I actually caught myself turning and looking behind me, even though the monitor was in front of me.
You were an adult at the time, right?
It's like, yes, this was only a couple of years back.
All right, Josh, what do you got for us today?
I for this side review, I was sent a couple of video cards, and I really grew to like this one. It's the Asus DirectCU GTX 460. There's nothing special about it in that it's overclocked or anything, but it's at a good price. It's $179 after the rebate. It comes with, the free-to-play StarCraft 2 for a little while thing, which you can just throw out. But the DirectCU cooler actually works really well as well. And as compared to that 40-millimeter fan, this has got a much larger one that's very, very quiet. So, I mean, if you're looking for a GTX 460, 1 gig, this is actually a really, really nice product to have. So I've been very impressed with it. It worked well. It's good quality feel to it. It's got a nice little back plate here that keeps the PCB nice and straight. So, yeah, Wasn't entirely sure about the direct CU stuff from Asus until I actually tried it, and it works as you were expecting to. So it's at $179 after rebate. It's a pretty good buy.
Was it reducing your home heating bills as well?
No, not too bad.
Awesome. Now, what was the pricing on this? Because with the 560 out, the 460s are kind of in a tight spot.
Yeah, it was like $179 after all the rebates and specials that you can get. So keep an eye on it. May go up or down, but still at $179. It's a nice bargain for a really fast board.
Cool. Last on the list, Alan.
My pick is neither hardware nor software this week. I'm taking a jump from the norm. Only because I am picking a city, San Antonio, Texas.
This is awful. I can't believe you're doing this.
Sorry, I have to. Because I'm in the military, as many avid listeners to a podcast know, which means I've pretty much been all over the stinking place. And this place, hands down, beats like everywhere so far. And I've only been here a week. So really, really nice city. If you have an opportunity to go somewhere for a weekend or whatever, I recommend it. And go downtown and check it out.
Okay, you know how sometimes Jeremy would pick weird things?
Hey, I gotta do it
stand
once.
by that Anvil launching link.
Yeah, that was way closer to a hardware.
Yeah, but I had beer. Come on.
Come on, it's a big city with more hardware than that.
This is not 30 seconds, say whatever you want section of the podcast.
I've been busy for 2 weeks. I can't pick other stuff.
All right. Fine. Fine.
Sorry.
Okay,
awesome
let's
notes.
see. That's it. We're done. On that note, we are out of here. Again, email address podcast@pcper.com, 1-888-38-PCPer, toll free, U.S. and Canada. If you want to share this show with your friends, I highly recommend it. If they're interested in home theater PCs, fusion processors, on-live technology, Blu-ray equipped home theater PCs, SSDs, process technologies, or bald people, PCPer.com.
With questionable senses of humor.
Very questionable. Very questionable. PCPer.com/podcast, Twitter.com/PCPer. You can follow us, get all of our articles and news stories as they go live, all the goods there. And I'm on Twitter as well, Ryan Shrout. I post most of our cool stuff there, as well as random rumblings throughout my day. So that's going to wrap up the show for this week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Al Malventano.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.